Welcome, folks. How we all doing? Hope you guys had a good stream over with Vosh. Welcome here, folks, and let's dive in. We're gonna be looking at Project 2025. Project 2025 private training videos. These are all videos that are intended. You have to keep in mind these videos are intended for appointees in a potential Trump administration. So basically, they are basically saying, hey, are you a MAGA Trump superfan? Well, if you apply to our Heritage Foundation, think tank-backed program, you can just be instantly put into a position of power when Donald Trump is elected, where you will serve as essentially a bureaucratic yes man for any decision he makes. So that's kind of what these are all about. These are to train the potential appointees in how they're supposed to do their job. As one might imagine, it's a whole lot of words to basically plead with the people applying to, not be criminals, not say slurs on social media, and do whatever Donald Trump says. Like that, those are the three cardinal rules. Yeah, a lot of serving at the pleasure of Donald Trump, which, look, there's only one person serving at his pleasure right now, and that's Laura Loomer, okay? Trump is mentioned in Project 2025 312 times. Yeah, it's not subtle. It's not subtle who the plan is for.
In between Election Day and swearing in the next president on January 20th the following year is a vital period. And today we're going to be talking about transitions and political appointments.
Why does it look like this man is very, very seriously contemplating making this guy disappear? He looks like he's remembering a past life where he could just make this guy take a long walk off a short pier with some cement shoes. You know what I'm saying? This guy's gonna feed him to some pigs.
We're glad you're joining us.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal.
This every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal. Except for that one time 4 years ago when we didn't accept it as normal.
Is nothing less than a miracle.
In America, we understand that a nation is only living
alive
as long as it is striving.
A nation is only alive as long as it's alive.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of
Spherical
defending
Man,
freedom
hello.
in
Where
its
you
hour
been?
of maximum danger.
You thought Republicans didn't like transitions? Wrong. They love transitions, okay? Just look at Mark Robinson's search history.
This nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
It really is too easy, wrong. Just look at Mark Robinson's search history, Alex Jones's search history. Insert any virulent Republican search history. Steven Crowder's search history.
Whether we go forward together with courage or turn back to policies that weakened our economy, diminished our leadership in the world, America's future will be in your hands.
But fun fact, they actually got Reagan to say that by dangling jelly beans in front of a teleprompter. It's true. It's true. Probably. Nick Fuentes? Hey, no. Nick Fuentes, we know Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes does not have trans people in his search history, okay? He just has a lot of men and femboys, okay? Mostly femboys. Now, some of them might wind up being trans someday. But he's not going out of his lane to search for them, okay? Cat boys with very little clothing on.
Welcome to Presidential Transitions and Appointment Hiring. My name is Ed Corrigan. I'm the president of the Conservative Partnership Institute. And during the
Again, you'll get a lot of guys like this from other kinds of think tanks, because this is a multi-think tank endeavor. if you've ever wondered, like, what is a think tank? It's basically a nonprofit that billionaires funnel money into to then think up rhetorically effective or, like, you know, PR effective ways of convincing the nation that actually voting against your interests is good.
2016 presidential transition, I was the Director of Domestic Policy Appointments. Today we have also Rick Dearborn, who was the Executive Director of the Trump transition in 2016, also worked on the Trump campaign. So Rick, why don't you...
Also, can we just look up, I do like playing the game of, like, hey, how is this person just the worst? You know, who is Ed Corrigan? Let's see. He builds the conservative movement. He was executive director of the Senate Steering Committee. Huh. So basically, he's been a lifelong shill for the conservative movement. He got his start on Capitol Hill as an intern on the staff of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina. From 1991 to 2003, he served in various capacities, including legislative director in the office of Bob Smith, a Republican from New Hampshire. In 2011, Corrigan received the Weyrich Award for Capitol Hill Staffer of the Year, an honor named after former Hill aide Paul M. Weyrich, who became the first president of the Heritage Foundation, because they're all ghouls. That's why, yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ed. Rick Dearborn, great to be with you today. We're going to cover an interesting set of issues and topics about a transition. You want to become a political appointee.
This is one transition you won't want to miss. We have before and after pictures. A trans timeline for the ages.
How does a transition work? How do you get tapped as a political
Tipster, how you
appointee? So
doing?
we're going to kind of walk through all of that. Worked on Capitol Hill for 30 some odd years, have worked in 2 administrations, was on the Trump campaign team early on.
This guy looks like a discount Andy Richter. I just realized. Wait a minute. It looks exactly like him. They're the same man.
Probably one of the first 15 folks hired, set up the DC office so that we could start connecting with the federal government, get to know members, work on endorsements, worked through the primaries.
Hey,
We wound up
job's a
working
job.
at the convention on the platform committee as well as the rules committee. All of that I thought was very informative as we started to look at how to do the transition. My first role in the transition was actually
Yeah, he's just one of the Richter brothers from Arrested Development. Yeah.
heading up kind of the congressional affairs piece
Hi,
of it.
my name is Professor Norm H. White Guy, your local Project 2025 representative. Just a friendly reminder that best practice is to not poo your pants when meeting the president.
I'm really liking this new community meme where you guys tell text-to-speech to communicate with me as if you're a fictional person. You know, I really appreciate all of the messages from the Australian handlers, from Professor Norm H. White Guy, Grigor Niet Russian. I appreciate all of these, okay?
After the election, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence had discussions about how best to move forward with the transition. And much like almost every other transition prior to, the Vice President was tapped to lead the transition effort. As that happened, and they still asked Chris Christie to remain on that board of advisors for the transition, the President and his team turned to me and asked if I would be executive director. I didn't have much of a choice, and so I said yes.
Wait, why didn't you have much of a choice? Were they gonna, Andy? Were they gonna kill you? Were they gonna feed you to the pigs, Andy?
And I wanted to do it, but it was a unique experience. We'll talk a little bit about how Ed and I connected up and his role as he came in doing political appointments. But I was fortunate that I had Ed Corrigan, who's been a friend of mine for a very long time, help us get through the process. So a presidential transition goes very far back in our country. They had been...
Wait. I did open this by saying that this guy was looking at him like he wanted to kill him. Like maybe this guy is the reason he couldn't say no. It was an offer he couldn't refuse.
Informal for multiple generations, many decades, through multiple presidents. In 1963, they did pass a Transition Act. It did coincide with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and from that point forward,
we established the feminization camps. They've been operating in secret for decades.
There was a federal government role in establishing the peaceful transition of power between one administration to the next. There was more meat on the bones put to a transition
for what?
After the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, because of the uncertainty that created, the fact that it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Of course, we had hanging chads in Florida, and the outcome of that election was uncertain for a good period of time. There was a concern, both a national security concern and just a general continuity of government concern, that we shouldn't have our government in that position again when we're trying to transfer power from one administration to the next, no matter who was going to win. So they passed yet another piece of transition.
Oh, he got banned because he was watching Shawshank Redemption on stream. Yeah, all right.
Legislation. That established a federal role, federal funds, federal...
Okay, chat, for reference, in case people don't know this, hanging chads are not... It's not a slang for dicks, chat. See, it's not slang for schlong, okay? It's... hanging chads is a term for ballots that haven't been cured yet, is right? I believe that's correct.
Involvement... staff-related support.
I am sure in this context, if you were at the club and someone was talking about a hanging chad, I would come to a very different conclusion. But it could be ooh-woo. I mean, sure, okay, yeah, all right.
Building support, offering up office spaces here in Washington, so transition teams could start their work well before the actual election. Fast forward to 2019, they beefed it up yet again. They asked the transitions to be even more organized. And if you fast forward that to the 2016 election, one of the interesting things I think that came out of the 2019 Act is they allowed congressional staff to be detailed to a transition. I think on our transition staff, we had maybe 2 or 3. It was a new concept. It cost a lot of money. We had to be thoughtful about the budget. But once the vice president was tapped as the head of the transition, and 3 days after the election, they turned to me and asked if I would be the executive director of the transition. And like I'd said previously,
yeah, these people are all about executive directing transitions, except when it comes to the transitions of trans people. Am I right? Hey, up top.
Started off working on the congressional affairs piece, but becoming the executive director of the transition had a whole new slate of responsibilities and issues that I had to work on and process.
Okay, I don't want to be mean here, but like, this is an educational video to teach people coming into like a new appointee status, what they need to do, what things are like. None of this was useful or helpful information. Like, no disrespect to this guy, although all of these people are ghouls, but like, none of that was helpful information.
So could you talk a little about the different phases of a transition? You had the phase when you...
Well, first you wear the oversized hoodie, you know, and you slowly build up like a cocoon. You build up your immunity to the idea that you could be trans. You play into more and more gendered stereotypes as you desperately try to hold on to your fake gender identity and go deeper and deeper into denial. Then, in stage 2, you have your egg cracked, and you realize that the reason you were wearing that depression hoodie all the time was because you actually were trans, and now you need to figure out what that means. Does it mean you're just gender fluid, and maybe you don't need to use any kind of medical transition? Maybe it means you do need just a little bit of medical transition. Maybe it means you can keep it a secret until you die. Who knows? But that's when you do know. That's when it enters phase 3, which is probably HRT, spinny skirts, the thigh-high socks, you know the ones, and posting images on the internet.
You were working on the campaign, and it was very informal. We were having sort of, confidential conversations about what the post-convention transition would look like, and then how that feeds into the...
Yeah, Dragonfly, you need some programmer socks.
What happens on election day and after. and then, of course, going all the way up to the inauguration, which we can talk about.
Absolutely. I'll take you.
And then eventually you reach stage 6, which is getting a sword. That's just something every trans person goes through. It's a rite of passage.
Up till about mid-November, because that's when I think you officially kind of flowed in and were a really large part of the political appointments piece. So at the beginning of that year leading up to the election, every Republican presidential candidate that had raised a certain amount of money was deemed eligible to have a transition representative. But at some point between...
Yeah, you get your standard issue gear. You get to choose, like, do you want like a rapier of some kind? Do you want a claymore? Do you want... or maybe you just want a dagger. You get to decide your starting equipment. For example, my starting equipment is actually this rapier, and it's pretty cool. I like it. Sorry, totally immaterial to the video.
Between the primaries and the convention, they provide you even...
What do non-binary folks get? They get access to a wider array of weaponry, actually. It's pretty cool.
Greater support. They start talking about your budget. There's money that's provided to both the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee. It's somewhere around $9 million, I think, for each. And you start building up your resources, utilizing the office space. Convention comes, and though the transition doesn't have a role per se at the convention, some of the players at the convention have a role with the transition. In my case, I was the congressional affairs liaison for the campaign with the transition, and had been tapped at the convention to represent the Trump campaign on the platform and to work with Don McGahn and others who were ultimately part of the administration, but at the time, the rules committee work that was going on for the convention itself. So post-convention...
Like, so much of this feels like he's basically just name-dropping to really pump up how important he is. Like, that's what this feels like to me. And it's not particularly interesting.
And Chris Christie and his team with Rich Bagger, who was the executive director, Bill Paltucci, who was the general counsel, and a host of others, would start to meet more regularly and have the office space to do...
Wait, I'm sorry. Sorry, it took a moment to sink in. There was a guy named Rich Bagger? Like how close can you get to calling someone just like Rich Moneybags? Like Rich M. Bagger. Alternatively, Dick Bagger is one hell of a name.
Do so to start planning out what the transition to a Trump administration would look like. Again, this is prior to the general election. So
hey,
that
Uncle
takes
Gumball.
you through the summer. In the fall, I'm going to more of these transition meetings. Rich is having good organized meetings and walking through what we need to prepare for. My role is the congressional affairs piece and talking about some of the needs that I was seeing from members of the House and members of the Senate on the Republican side. The election happens, and at that point, 3 days afterwards, I was asked to be the executive director because of the decision that the vice president was going to be put in charge.
Man, I'm riveted by this guy's story of just slowly climbing the ranks of bureaucracy.
Charge of the transition. So because of that, they also wanted to change, I think, the leadership of the transition at that point, and still keep Governor Christie engaged. So we made that change, and then I'd say somewhere around a little bit before Thanksgiving or maybe right afterwards, gave you a call about political appointments, which is one of the biggest sections of the transition team.
Okay.
And asked you...
finally getting to relevant info.
I think I asked you to pack up and come hang out with us for a little bit, but it turned out to be a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But let's walk through how that played out and what your role was.
I was an employee at the Heritage Foundation at the time, and so that was kind of my role. And one of the things about this is that when you work for a nonprofit, there is the ability to work on a transition team without leaving your current job. And so that's a lot of the folks on the transition team worked for organizations like Heritage while they were doing their work for the government. But no, you give me a call, I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, and said, I need you to come up on Friday after Thanksgiving to New York to help out with the transition. I was, of course, excited. I would love this. Was Trump was had been elected, and so this was.
I was just praying you'd say yes.
And so I was excited to go up there. I said, okay, well, Hen, how long do you think it's going to be? You were like, maybe, I don't know, a week or two. And I was like, okay. So I packed enough for a week or two. As soon as I got up there,
I cannot stress enough how this is meant to be an instructional video on how to do a fascist takeover of America. And it's literally just these two chuckle nuts talking about their exploits like they're something the general public would care about. Like they genuinely think this is exciting information because they got to hang out with people whose names you recognize.
Realized I live in New York right now. And
I wasn't going to tell you that. I needed you to think it was temporary.
But it was fun. I mean, it's like you're working on a campaign or something, and we all kind of were working around the clock. What was exciting about that time is that you're taking so much incoming in terms of people who really want to serve. And so the question is, how do you sort that out? And I think that process really informs, if you're a job seeker, somebody who really wants to be a part of this process, wants to serve in the administration, how do you engage with that system? I will tell you, I had about 10 departments under my portfolio. There were the domestic policy departments, and basically what we were really looking for, there was unlike the pre-election transition, this phase really started to heavily involve people who had been previously occupied by the campaign. Really, when you're in the middle of a campaign, you don't want to distract your campaign staff with focus on the transition.
Right.
And so, but now you had...
These guys both look like they would pull the trigger on firing the Death Star laser on Alderaan with an almost like fiendish level of glee.
A lot of these senior players, Jared Kushner, Steve Bannon, and so forth, really heavily involved in this transition process. And so, in our team, we had a small personnel team. Bill Hagerty, who's now a United States Senator, was our leader, and really had a heart for this idea of personnel and placing good people in these roles. And so we had it divided up into different disciplines. But really, what we were doing was being a bottleneck that filtered.
Okay, look, I know we've made a lot of jokes so far about like, transition, trans people, but unironically, due to the way the set is lit, it looks like the color scheme of their 2025 logo here is trans-colored. Right? Like, that's not just me, right? You all see it, right? It's the same color scheme, right? You guys see it?
The recommendations from outside organizations, from Trump allies and folks who were lieutenants on the campaign. And what you were really looking for is, what kind of people are going to be strategically aligned with the president? Somebody who's philosophically aligned.
Right.
You're looking for particular expertise, but basically that was our job, was to then filter it up. And what I would be interested in you talking about, Rick, because I was in this sort of little war room putting together these lists together that would then make their way up to the to what we called the executive committee. But then, Rick, you were the executive director, so you were in these meetings. Like, what did that look like when these big notebooks are being presented with all these different positions? How does that all, like, what are those meetings like? This is in this big conference room in Trump Tower?
A glass conference room. Happy to talk about that. I do want to, I'm kind of going back and going forward at the same time. I do want to make sure and be clear that as you're watching this, we want you to get involved in a transition. If you want to be part of an administration, getting involved.
We want you to get involved in a transition, any transition, okay? Look, we want you to develop a healthy interest in infrastructure, okay? Go down to the train station and see how long you can watch the trains coming and going, all right? Go out and marvel at bus routes and the maps of the bus routes, okay? The intricacies of an efficient busing system. See how long that fascinates you. If it's longer than 15 minutes, we've got a transition for you.
And that transition early on is important. Yeah. So political appointments is a piece of it. I'm going to circle right back and talk about how that played out when we were having the meetings with then President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence. But there's different components of a transition. Political appointments is really critical. You're tapping all the leaders for your government, all your cabinet heads, all the key agencies. There's an agency action section, how would you create the Department of Agriculture and run it, and what would the policies be, and what do you need from personnel, what would happen on day one. You build those plans out. There's a public relations segment to a transition. There's a congressional segment that I was part of. There's the leadership piece.
Okay, we're fully 13 minutes in, and we're finally getting like actual actionable information if you were part of this cohort of people that intends to undo democracy.
Piece of the transition that I wound up moving from congressional affairs to executive director.
Just try a little bit of Hearts of Iron, or Victoria, or Stellaris. Well, how many hours can you go?
So there's a lot of different places to get plugged in and to join. My best advice to you, I think Ed would agree, is just volunteer and do it. It's worth your time. It's a lot of time.
Watch I Saw the TV Glow and see if it resonates with you on a slightly more personal level.
It's a lot of hours. You'll probably be in the building that's down here in Washington, D.C. There's a chance you might be pulled up to whatever the home state is of that potential or that particular nominee once they've been elected. But getting on the ground level of transition is important. But talk about how this played out. You mentioned political appointments.
Man, Uncle Gumbald, I want to play Frostpunk too. It's, I got to make content though for the content minds.
In the war room that you and Bill had. Well, after you put all your materials together,
Good night, War
Bill
Gamer
came
Lena.
to me and said, okay, I think we're ready to talk about a lot of these candidates. I mean, we wanted to get every possible quality candidate that we could, and then organize that and put it in front of the president, which is what you did in the political appointee section. So those were the kinds of things that we were doing in that room, and you would walk through a whole list of individuals. We did that with the entire cabinet. I mean, it was hours and hours and hours of work. So we'd schedule time to meet with him, talk to him about the candidates. So he was incredibly attentive, asked fantastic questions. We gave him great information, and he used that to then select his cabinet.
So one of the things that when we think about how do you get involved in the transition, and there's different roles. Obviously, we were
Number one, you go to see your local gender clinic. Often check the laws of your state. Depending on your age, you can get informed consent and get right on that HRT. Okay, you just need to get some blood work done to get a baseline. All right, you go in there, get your blood work done, explain why you want HRT, sign the informed consent forms, and bada bing, bada boom. In about 2 weeks, you'll be on your way. Okay.
I was involved in the personnel. You were the executive director, but then you had these, the policy formulation teams, agency action, regulatory reform. There were legal teams. There's a whole bunch of different sort of facets to this that I'd be curious of, because if you want to serve in the administration, the goal is to be a part of this transition.
Right.
And so, what are some of the different aspects of the transition in addition to personnel?
Look, I would say that agency action was pretty important. There was a lot of dedicated work placed in that section. Of the several floors that we had in that building, I think there was at least 1 to 2 floors dedicated to agency, or at least an entire wing dedicated to agency action.
And we say agency action, kind of talk a little about what is that? Is that
Good night, Gat.
memoranda on how the agency is going to function?
You're building out the blueprint that in a perfect world, this next president, as guided by the transition team, which had members that were close to the president.
Yeah, if you're appointed, your job is going to be to come up with a plan for how the government can be gutted in your specific area. Yeah.
How would the next president run NASA? How would the next president run the Department of Agriculture, the State Department, DOD? And you go out and find experts and individuals who have some experience in these areas. So if you're living right now in Omaha or Kansas City, or you live in New Jersey or North California, and you've done some work on the environment, or you've had some experience with the Department of Agriculture, and you really want to get involved in a transition, why not apply and see if you can come in, and you'll be both learning and helping folks who may have worked in those departments for years, are good, strong conservatives, are looking for someone just like you to help them to be part of the team. So if you sign up for the database to get involved, the next step for you is to really be active in the transition. But agency action is building the the blueprint for how you would run all the agencies. Congressional affairs, probably better if you've had some congressional experience. Maybe you've had it at the state level with state legislatures. Maybe you've had it at the federal level with the Senate and the House. But working with Congress is something critical to the executive branch and kind of setting up those relationships and working through it. There is a designated office of policy. What is the policy of this president? Now, if the president-elect in 2024 and going into 25 is a prior elected official that has had a record, they're going to have certain policies that
they're talking about how to like grassroots Hitler, because that would imply that like they're banking on like grassroots support. No, they're talking about how to astroturf Hitler. Like that's what they're trying to talk about. They want you to seem like you have popular support without actually having popular support. You know, that's the trick with these people.
They believe. In 2016, our policy was built on writing down every speech that Donald Trump had ever delivered during the campaign, and each policy was cataloged, and we used that to develop what the policy was, at least at the ground level. I mean, he built on all of that. Some of it he changed to some degree, but he was pretty consistent. I think much more surprisingly conservative than people ever gave him credit for, and carried through, which is, I think, the reason why, at least for him, he was so popular, that he actually did what he said he was going to do.
So one of the things that on the personnel team.
Yeah, like these guys are like weaponizing. They have weaponized levels of anti-Riz. The anti-Riz particles are overwhelming. They're turning this video into a real Ohio.
Team that we focused on was so the cabinet gets picked first. Then you're looking at each department has a deputy secretary or deputy administrator, deputy attorney general, and so we were focused on those.
But talk a little bit about how you went about that and how these folks would plug into that effort.
So the different layers to these positions, you have your these would be PAS appointments, right? Yeah. Presidential appointee, Senate confirmed. The S is Senate confirmed. So the cabinet, the deputy secretary, and the assistant secretaries were to be typically PAS appointments. And so the way we would basically put these lists together was we were getting recommendations from, many of them come from members of Congress. They would be coming from people who are senior executives in the campaign, allies of the president, anybody who would be important VIPs whose name would matter to the president-elect.
Spherical Man, a key component to all of these videos is reiterating that Donald Trump doesn't have a coherent platform. So instead, you have to watch every single Donald Trump speech, and you have to read all of his tweets and Truth Social posts. That is literally something that they mention at least once per video.
That would be a pipeline for names, and then some of these folks who come from nonprofits and things like that, we might just identify somebody. I might know this person and say that this person should be considered, even though they're not specifically recommended by somebody. But on the sheets, there's very brief information that was presented to the executive team. Those sheets would always include what name is behind this person, who is recommending this person. This person is recommended by Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway and Jared Kushner, whoever that was, or Congressman, Jim Jordan. And so that helps the executive team to say, okay, like in any hiring process, you want to know who vouches for this person. And so that ended up being a big thing for us. And so if you're looking for a position in the administration, you want to be thinking through each of these appointments is its own little mini campaign.
Absolutely.
Right? If you want to get somebody into the deputy secretary or the assistant secretary of some department, you want to get as many people vouching for that person. You don't just go on whatever the website was and put your stuff in and think that good things are going to happen. You need to have this coming in from all kinds of different sources. And so that was what we were doing, was kind of collecting that information.
So Ed, can I just...
Yeah, go ahead.
It'd be like looking for a job, right? So
I hate these men so much. Not even because of their relative level of evilness compared to all of the other people that have been in the videos, but this guy just is... It's like looking for a job, right? Yeah, you have an entire process set up to give these people jobs, to appoint these people to jobs. It is in fact exactly like looking for a job, because that's what this entire Heritage Foundation Project 2025 program is. It's not like looking for a job, it is looking for a job.
It is a job. You're trying to get on the transition, you want to work in government, you want to work in the administration. Even if you're in the private sector looking to try to start that first job, who do you know? Who can vouch for you? How can that individual help influence the folks who are going to make a decision of whether to bring you on board or not? So your network, your ability to tap into the folks that can vouch for you and know you well, and having them weigh in on your behalf is really critically important. And let's face it, politics is different than the machine shop where you're building widgets. Politics is all about networking, right? It's all about connecting with people. That is the art of politics. So if you're watching this right now, you probably have some skill in that regard anyway. You need to continue to develop that and think through who might be able to vouch for you if you want to go work at NASA or at Department of Agriculture or an independent commission or agency. Right.
So yeah, and basically depending on what position you're actually interested in, you might have different strategies. So if it's a PAS position, what that means is you can't serve in that position until you're Senate confirmed. And after Inauguration Day, the Senate only has so much floor time to consider confirmation. So if you're being appointed to the Assistant Secretary of Commerce or HHS, it's going to be a long time before you're actually getting across the Senate floor, unless there's a unanimous consent, which is not as often anymore.
Plus, you have 100 people that are going to vote on you, so that connectivity with those individuals is important too. Having one or two senators or their key staff that know you, that can vouch for you with their colleagues, is going to help how you get scheduled. When you get scheduled, if you're going to get that vote. How the hearing goes. So you need to be thinking about, like I think Ed said it best, you run it like you would run a campaign. And for those of you that are engaged in politics, you probably
This video is hurting me. Evil Andy Richter, why are you hurting me like this?
probably ran for class president, student council representative. It's the same kind of thing, a little bit on steroids, but you're trying to get a lot more folks active and behind you and talking about your qualifications and why you would be the right conservative candidate for that particular position.
Yeah, and so what I would say on the PAS positions, especially in this early phase right after the transition, there's two additional levels that we were focusing on during the transition that are appointments. One is called the landing teams, and the other one is called the beachhead teams. And I'll have ask Rick to talk a little about the details of what these positions are for and how you get selected. But these are the landing teams typically will go in. It's during that time before inauguration when there's a president-elect and you're working inside the department. Explain the landing teams a little bit.
Yeah, so the landing teams go in beforehand. Our government, our system, our federal government's an amazing thing, but it's massive. And on January 20th at noon, precisely at noon, the next administration takes over. So leading up to that point, you want people landing in all of these major departments and being introduced and receiving briefings from the folks in that department. Now, some of the political appointees will be happy to talk to you. Some of the careers will be brought in to talk about, these are the programs we're in charge of. Here's our jurisdiction. This is what we've done to date. Here's everything that's pending. These are the rulemakings that we've been working on. You would always hope that every administration is thoughtful with the administration that comes in. And look, I'm going to be honest. When we met with the outgoing Obama administration, couldn't have been more helpful. I had meetings as the executive director of the transition team.
Whoa. I don't know that you're allowed to say that in a Project 2025 video. The Obama administration? Very helpful? Sounds like disloyalty that will be purged as soon as Führer Trump is in power.
In the White House with the chief of staff, Dennis McDonough was fantastic. Sat down, said, look, the government's at your disposal. send your landing teams in. I want to say landing teams went in sometime in early December, early to mid-December, depending. Some departments were ready to receive them and others weren't. A lot of it had to do with where do we house them, because they're going to come in the morning, they're going to get briefings. A lot of it was them taking notes and being prepared for the...
They do know the type of people they're hiring are generally stupid, right? Like they'd know how to run a campaign. Well, yeah, the people they're hiring won't know how to run a campaign. But I think a video like this is just boring enough and drops enough names that they feel like, oh yeah, this is what being at work is like. That's right, we're being trained. And also there's like a lot of repetition in a lot of these videos so that they'll get the main info of the training, which is again, like, please don't do crimes, please don't post slurs on social media, do whatever Donald Trump asks you to do, and also, you know, have a vague idea of how to do your job.
A more permanent team that would come in. So the landing teams go in.
Wait, are they blatantly advertising to high schoolers or recent high schoolers? Yes. Literally, they do not care who they hire as long as the people that are being hired and being appointed will do the thing that they're there to do, which is to rubber stamp anything that Donald Trump hands down, even if it's illegal, you know?
In early, mid-December, they like I'd mentioned prior, they come in, they set meetings, get briefings, figure out kind of the levers of power, who's responsible for what the jurisdictions are, getting some sense, cataloging the things that are in action currently. Now the beachhead team is going to come in after that, and they're going to be the group that really is full of the experts for that department that will be there permanently. The landing team, some subset of them, will be part of the administration's group of people that would be in that department down the road. But they
basically leftists pretending to be conservatives, sowing doubt, enacting progressive policies on an astroturf grassroots level. Project 2025, make it progressive, basically. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work in our favor for a very specific reason, and it's that leftists care a lot about ideological purity, and lying about your actual political positions tends to be viewed overwhelmingly negatively. It winds up, I feel like it winds up hurting more than it winds up helping. I do think we need larger organizing efforts, but essentially we don't need to do that. What we need to do is organize and build our political power, and I think we do that best by being honest, you know? It just kind of feels doomer in red states. Yeah, but I mean, like, that's always the case. It's always been doomer from the get-go, right? Like, even in blue states, it's doomer, right? Because the deck is always going to be stacked against us. Like, it's always going to be institutional power arrayed against left-leaning initiatives. The money and the power are all arrayed against us. All we really have at the end of the day as leftists, it's people. That's all we have. When we rely on kind of like trickery or deceit, it doesn't really work out for us because people are put off by trickery and deceit for the most part. And in terms of faking being a Republican to get into office and do like progressive things, the issue is government relies on other people working with you, you know, like maybe that would work if you managed to find like a political position where it was a split body on like the city council or something and your vote would make the difference and you ran as a Republican and win and then you just vote with like the Democrats or the progressives. Like maybe that could work. But it would work like one time, you know? It would work exactly one time and you'd have a devil of a time being reelected. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but like the real answer is not the fun answer. And the real answer is that we would be better served by just putting our work and our effort into like doing more honest organizing, like with the DSA or something. Look what happened to Joe Manchin. Yeah.
They normally come in and basically just try to understand, all right, where are you in the process? What's happening in this department now? beachhead
Feels like so many are so down to be Nazis, though. Yeah, but the way to deal with that is not by running as a fake Nazi.
comes in closer to the transition of power, and they wind up basically.
Well, the thing is, you don't persuade them. You out-organize them. Most people in America are not people who vote. The vast majority of people in America do not vote, and you're much better served just convincing people who aren't voting to vote alongside you because they have, vested material interests in more progressive policies. Pointing that out, by the way, generally will win a non-voting person over to your side. If you point out, hey, if you vote Democrat and we get Medicare for all, you can take your daughter to the doctor. People tend to care more about that than vague promise of something sometime in the future being better.
Taking the information developed by the landing
Trickle down
team,
economics and all that,
and then deploying their people throughout the building, because it's going to take some time before that first cabinet nominee is confirmed by the Senate.
Right.
So you're running the department predominantly with career staff. All of the political staff from the prior administration will be asked.
I will say progressives play to be right, conservatives play to win. That's true. I think what we need to do as progressives and as leftists, frankly, is to shift the conversation from this idea that by being ideologically pure or correct on an issue, that's advocacy. We need to be able to move away from the idea that simply being correct is enough, because it's not. We need to move away from the idea that being correct is the end all be all, and instead work with what can we achieve. It's not enough to simply do what the Green Party does and show up every few years and be like, yeah, the Dems don't want to give you all of the things you want. Well, we're going to give you all the things you want. And then they lose horribly with 3.5% of the vote or something. It's not enough to just have a correct position. You need to actually build the power structure to make that correct position real.
And to a person will offer up their resignation because they're no longer working for the new president. They work for the prior president. And so those beachhead teams that are going to get the information from the landing team then start to fan out across the department and start to grab the levers of power, look at what reports are due, what the rulemaking processes are, what's expected of them, everything from their grant programs to their mandatory programs, how are they functioning, meeting with all the career staff to understand what's expected of the Department of Energy before the end of the week. What are we doing this month? Mm-hmm. But getting all of that down so that when the secretary is confirmed, you can really start implementing all your plans. It's not that you can't, but that secretary has to be careful. They can't go before a Senate committee and act as if they're going to be the secretary, because they're trying to convince that group of senators that they would like to be that secretary, and they have to be confirmed by the Senate. That might be an interesting thing to talk about. You've worked a lot on those Senate nominations and what that's like.
And to make a finer point on what you described about that period of confirmation, not just at the secretary level, but at the deputy level and the assistant secretaries, right, that you may be appointed as a deputy secretary or as a secretary of a department, and you may want to have a say in who gets to work in that department, but you're not confirmed yet. And so it's a little bit of a difficult and tricky dance because they don't want to be acting in a way that's going to annoy the senators.
That's right.
And basically maybe compromise their ability to get confirmed. But meanwhile, the government has to run, the new president has to take the reins of power, and this is where the beachhead teams, it is a very messy process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these people, mostly in this agency, that don't have signing authority for much of anything. They just work there, but they have de facto power, and that the careers understand that they're going to be in senior positions. But it's
the careers.
It's a tricky discipline. There's certain positions in the agency that will be appointed early on that carry a lot of weight because of their connection to the White House. Those are typically the White House liaisons.
Right.
And so we can talk a little about what the White House liaison is.
Sure.
And how they interact with the White House in each department. These are embedded people that are in the departments, but they have usually the blessing of the White House to sort of.
Yeah, yada gone, exactly. Like how love isn't enough in marriages, it's hard work too, and that's a hard sell for some people. Well, like, I would argue that love is enough in marriages, right? But love involves doing work. Love is working on yourself. It is working on your household. It is working on your relationship. Love incorporates work. And in that same vein, like, being correct on its own isn't enough, but being correct with the work, that is the trick, you know?
Make recommendations, particularly on personnel. But if you're looking to get into an agency, a lot of people are going to have their sights set on a specific job.
8 left, maybe?
And that's good. You want to basically kind of know where you want to land. But ultimately, to get there, it may not be a straight path. It may not be, I'm going to stay in my law firm until I get confirmed as the assistant secretary. Well, that's possible. That may never happen.
Right.
But sometimes if you're willing to take the maybe a pay cut, right? Most people are going to get.
It will be a pay cut.
There's usually
Over and over and over again, these people are like, yeah, we're going to pay you shit. Like, I think they're really looking for dipshit conservatives who are independently wealthy.
Pay cuts coming on these things, especially if you're in a senior role with a law firm or something. But you're willing to go in on a beachhead team and just embed yourself somewhere. You don't necessarily have a guarantee of a particular job, but you're in the door. You've got a desk and a phone, and you can basically start kind of building those relationships. I feel like that's a real big part of this. Get yourself to be involved in the transition. Get yourself to be, in theory, on a landing team. The landing teams will typically be people who have a certain level of expertise in the discipline. Some of those may or may not end up wanting to work in the administration. But most importantly, I think, get yourself on a beachhead team because that's where the highest volume of people will go in on day one. They don't have any specific appointment yet. Some will, but I think for the most part, a lot of them are just trying to figure out what's going on in this department and sort of meet with the careers.
Yeah, I'd tell you that the landing teams were a combination of folks with expertise and the warm bodies that we needed.
Yeah,
we were the Trump administration.
By the way, I have no doubt that, like, transitioning between governmental teams is a very messy process, but, like, these people want to make it so much more messy. They want to blow up the entire apparatus.
Especially early on, was very unique.
They talk about it like war, Josh, because to them it is a war. It is an ideological war that they intend to win definitively with this plan. By putting everyone in positions of power, by putting all of these conservative appointees in positions of power, betting them for loyalty to Donald Trump, again, their loyalty to Donald Trump is the number one quality they're being vetted for. They can ensure that anything that Donald Trump says gets enacted, whether or not it's legal.
It was tough. I mean, what we're doing right now is going to be so important to the next president because establishing all of this, providing the expertise, looking at a database of folks that can be part of the administration, talking to you like we are right now about what is a transition about, why do I want to be.
Why aren't progressives doing Project 2025? Well, largely because, one, any kind of effort like that would be anti-democratic, which would be anti-progressive values. But number two, progressives do not possess the numbers, they do not possess the numerical strength or structural support to carry out anything remotely on this scale. I don't think, in general, most progressives are super keen on overthrowing democracy.
Be engaged in it. What would my role be? That's a luxury that we didn't have. We were trying to fill a lot of positions, and early on it was hard to get everybody that we needed kind of in the door and in the right spot. The bulk of you won't necessarily be up for the secretary's position at DOD. You may not even be up for an assistant secretary's position. But there's going to be positions that may not be Senate confirmable that you may wind up being up for. A lot of what's called Schedule C positions. Those are political appointees that would work in the administration and running incredibly important programs that report up to a presidential appointee that might be in charge of a larger program department, and you're one of the sub-agency pieces of that. There, I think, still is the plum book It's a government document that talks about all the different positions of government. If you get the chance to review that, it's probably worth it. Think about what you really enjoy, what you want to work on. The most important part of being...
I don't know, just like being in the places they're talking about, like being a part of the teams to help Dems pass progressive policies. Well, so Noralia, part of the problem is a lot of corporate Democrats, when they get elected, aren't appointing progressives, they appoint other corporate Democrats. Progressives only have as much space at the table in the Democratic Party as we are able to win for ourselves. Again, largely to that end, like the largest coalition of progressives are probably in DSA. DSA is probably the vehicle that most closely resembles what you're talking about. There's no special secret room. The secret sauce is having enough political power to ensure that you have a spot at the table. Because again, when you really dig down into it, we're not that far off from Game of Thrones shit. Like backstabbing, destroying careers, and the like. It gets really cutthroat, and when push comes to shove, corporate Dems would much rather have other corporate Dems in their corner than progressives. If we elected all the people the median voter voted for, we'd be in serious trouble. The median voter is not engaged in politics, and frankly is probably going to pick, I don't know, like... Andrew Yang for president.
A great federal government civil service career person or political employee is being interested in and dedicated to what you do. At the end of the day, federal government is about serving the public, right? It's not about serving the interests of government. The government is the public. So making sure that you're going to follow what your interest is, whether it be science or in the Department of Defense, or you're a great lawyer and you want to work in the Justice Department, or you're a great lawyer but you're really interested in environmental issues, so you want to go to EPA or the Department of Interior, or you have no law degree at all but you're really, really interested in commerce and export issues. So whatever it is that you're interested in, think about how you could prepare yourself and then get connected with the campaign of your choice. Your candidate may or may not win. If your candidate does bow out of the race, they probably support someone else. Maybe that's the person you support. Ultimately, it could be that potential presidential nominee. And then that individual goes on to become the president-elect. At that stage, the transition really explodes, and they're going to be looking for a lot of folks like you to get engaged, be on the ground level, and support that administration as it's starting to lay out its plans of how it would like to govern once they come into office in January. So you have from early November, that first Tuesday in early November, leadership for the transition getting itself set would already be ready to roll. And then soon after that, for the next 2 some odd months, you're helping to build out what will be the governing group of individuals for the next president.
And one of the things to be thinking about as this process goes forward is...
What have we learned in this video so far? Let's try and summarize what we've figured out. What have we learned so far? Number one, there is a beachhead team that will operate between November and the swearing in that will oversee transitional activities and also help get other people appointed. And... that kind of seems like it. Like, you're going to get a pay cut, it's going to suck, but you're going to be able to serve at the whims of the president, and that will be good somehow. Is that about a complete summary? I feel like I'm missing something, because there's no way they could have talked for 30 minutes here and not said more than that. Did I black out? Did I almost die of boredom and just miss a moment or two while I was flatlining? Did I not miss anything? The art of saying nothing. It's truly incredible, isn't it?
The different phases of this, you have your
It's an almost like monk-like commitment. Like they took an oath to whatever dark god they serve, and whoa, they're suddenly imbued with the fantastic power of being able to speak forever and never say anything.
Sort of, your beachhead teams trying to get in a beachhead team. When I was running the domestic policy personnel, I was trying to strongly encourage people to take beachhead team positions. Even people who wanted to take a more senior position, I was like, let's just get you in the door. And the reason is because on January 20th, when the president puts his hand on the Bible, everything changes. The transition shuts down, and a new Office of Presidential Personnel stands up. The cabinet secretaries are going to start getting confirmed, and all of a sudden you got a lot more voices in the room about who's going to get what position, and the whole process changes. So getting in the door early on, I think, it can provide you huge advantages. And I will say, even on the beachhead team things,
can provide you with huge advantages in wielding power, because apparently that's all that gets these guys hard.
You have, in every agency, you have a number of positions that are careers, right? These are civil servants that serve, and they're not political. But then you have your political positions, and so what we were looking at to try and fill out our beachhead teams was which departments have the most political positions, right? These are kind of theoretical beachhead teams,
Right.
And so some people who may have said, okay, I really want to work in the Justice Department. But I didn't have that many politicals in the Justice Department, so I would put them in the Agriculture Department. There was a lot of political position in the Agri Department.
Right.
So we could drop a bunch of beachhead team members in there. They can learn a little about the Agriculture Department, but then maybe move over to DHS or DOJ or wherever their ultimate goal is to be. And so it's just something to be creative and be open to different ideas as you're trying to serve. Ultimately, the question is, do you believe in the person who's elected president, and do you want to serve that person? And if you really do, you need to get involved at every layer in this process, because as the process moves down the road, very quickly you get more cooks in the kitchen and more people asking for their people to be involved.
TLDR, dismantle the institutions by being so entrenched into those institutions, by climbing up the ranks until you wind up becoming those institutions without changing anything except turning government into a rubber stamp. Yeah, that is really it, right? Except that in this case, the idea of climbing up the ranks until you wind up becoming the institutions is skipped, because they talked about their struggle to do that, but they no longer have to climb up the ranks of the institutions, because the people that they made this video for are just going to be appointed at the tops of these institutions. So really, like, we're just back where we started, which is that your job is to dismantle the institutions and rubber stamp anything that Donald Trump says, right? They spent a lot of time in this video detailing their time working their way up the ladder, working with X organization and, Z and Y political figures that you would recognize. And now they're here to tell you how you don't actually have to work your way up the ranks anymore, because they'll just give you a job.
Involved. One other thing just to be mindful of is that for each of these positions, even at the beachhead team level, there is a vetting process that goes on behind the scenes. They will look at all of your social media. They'll do background checks on you, your normal FBI background checks. They'll do all those kinds of things. So if you want to serve in the administration, be mindful of your social media. Take a look at what you've put out there. Maybe clean it up a little bit. I think it's heartbreaking when you have somebody you know is a good person, but they may have said something. Maybe they were really heavily involved in the campaign and said negative things about the person who ends up winning. So if you're on a campaign, be mindful of that too.
Please don't post racial slurs. Please don't post the N-word on your social media accounts. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just say no.
Sometimes in the heat of the campaign, you can get a little carried away with things, but understand that at the end of the day, if you want to be able to serve, everything you've put out there publicly is going to be looked at. And so just be prepared for that kind of vetting.
Yeah, I would just emphasize that. I mean, we had a small number of folks when we first came in with the transition. It grew. Vetting was incredibly important, but we had very few folks doing it. We tried to be as in-depth as we possibly could. Of course, there were people that were placed that...
How many loyalists do they need for this? I mean, they're gunning for tens of thousands, but I think they're up to like, I don't know. Wait, let me Google. Let me Google before I give you a number that's wrong. How many? Let's see. Oh, it doesn't tell you. Doesn't tell you. Just asks you to fill out a form. I thought it would state their goal on the website. Interesting. Okay. Not finding a lot of details on the actual numbers that they're looking for. I'm not finding any concrete number that's been thrown out there. I think they want as many people as possible to apply, but I'm not finding a concrete number. So weird.
Would wind up doing something that got themselves in trouble. But whether you're vetted or not, individuals can do that. The most important thing is for you to take care of you. Be smart about it. You're serving the public good. You're working for your fellow citizens. So you want to make sure that you're focused on the job that you want to do. Try to stay off all the extracurricular stuff. Any of the comments that you say that you feel could be used against you will be. If they're heated and hot, guaranteed they will be. So
I would never advocate that you would mess with the political think tank, the Heritage Foundation, by creating bogus applications on their website. I would never advocate for that. If someone did do that, though, it'd be very funny. But I would never advocate for it.
Be thinking about that. You're in the public domain once you decide you're going to work in government, which means that the public is going to scrutinize you. And that means senators, and it also means the administration members themselves as they're looking to bring you in to work in the administration.
So to recap, the phases of the transition, you have the phase of the transition which we're in now, which is before the election, before the primaries really get up and running. You have the phase right before, during the primary, but before the convention, which is very informal, but a way to get involved in a campaign. After the convention, you'll have the most a lot of people starting to.
How do you think they got so many people with fake sounding names? My working theory is that Republicans have a predisposition to name their children names that sound fake.
To work on this formal position, this government-funded transition team. The phase after the election is when the campaign staff get involved. That's when it gets real, and when the positions really start getting selected. And then you have that. And that's also after the inauguration when you have the landing teams. We'll go into working in these agencies to just learn. They're not actually formally appointed government employees, but they're basically learning about the agencies and so forth. Then after inauguration is when the beachhead teams go in and when the appointments start getting selected, and that's when people will actually get in and start serving.
So to walk through what the different components are of a transition. You have a leadership team tapped by the president-elect's senior team, the president-elect himself or herself. Then you have different pieces of it. I know that Ed's talked a little bit about what the different phases of the transition are. The political appointments section, which is a large part of the team. That's all the personnel. You've got the beachhead and the landing teams that go with it. But you have an agency action team. This is a large number of people. Probably the largest group in the transition. It's broken out by each of the different departments and agencies, all designed to kind of walk through and capture what it is that you're looking to do if you're starting on that first day of the administration, and carries out with 50-day plans, 100-day plans, 180-day plans. That's part of the work that they do. What our project 2025 is doing is trying to provide a lot of those elements ahead of time, so that agency action team can really take that information and build on it as they get ready for the administration in that following January. You also have a public relations team. So if you're into PR and messaging, a lot of the folks that get on the transitions public relations team also find their way into the public relations departments in a lot of the different agencies. So if you enjoy message and communication, it could be everything from going into the communications department at the White House to any of the agencies that are out there. We tried to meet with the press corps on a regular basis. Sometimes it was daily. We'd provide updates to the transition. The latest cabinet secretary that had been tapped that was going to be sent up by the president to the Senate for confirmation. The latest piece of information on a hugely important issue that the president-elect was looking to try to focus on at the beginning of their term. A whole series of things and information about what's going on with the transition goes through public relations shop. There's a smaller congressional relations piece. These are individuals that probably have a little bit more experience. It could be in state legislatures where you've had experience working with members of a state assembly or a state senate. But a lot of times it's also folks who've had some experience with the U.S. Senate and the United States House to just work with them, answer their questions. There'll be a ton of meetings that they want to take, and there's going to be a lot of requests from them to sit down with the president-elect or his or her team to talk about what they would like to see from the president going into the next term. It takes a lot of people and a lot of commitment to work with them on that. So that's another component. There's a dedicated and established policy team. This team is trying to take everything that was made as a commitment by that president, now president-elect, and really focus on how they would break that out by each of the different departments and agencies.
Oh my God, how many different times can you reiterate that if you get put into a position, your job is to come up with a plan to do your job? Oh, really? Boy, howdy, is it your job to know how to do your job?
We doing big shimping, we spending cheese. You're a fabulous Jack.
Hannah, thank you for the 10 pounds. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, because this is, let me tell you, we are big shimping tonight, but this video, it's not the yeehaw. I'm gonna come up with my own set of Gen Alpha slang, okay?
What are the big key themes? A lot of that blueprint would be used in the White House. A lot of that blueprint will then be kind of divided up by the different agencies and departments that would then work to execute it once the president-elect is then sworn in that following January. Those are the largest functions of a transition team. The political appointments Ed's, I think, walked through very well. Again, that's basically what you're looking at for a presidential transition. If you're looking to work for a strong conservative, if you're looking to work in government and try to serve your country, this is a great opportunity. Ed and I have been in this business for a very long time. Every single day you got up, you wanted to be able to solve someone's problem. At the end of the day, if you actually had a chance to do that, it was the most rewarding feeling you ever had, and you wanted to get up the next day and do this.
At the end of the day, it was one of the most rewarding feelings you ever had, you know, advocating for trans people to not have rights and to get black and brown people removed from our country. Very rewarding feelings. If I had to study about the correlation of tie length and benevolence, good God.
Same thing. If that's the kind of thing that drives you, then you're going to want to join us and join the next president and be part of that person's administration.
Amen.
Job responsibilities. Number 1, have job. Number 2, do what the president tells you. Number 3, profit, but not too much, because you're taking a pay cut, mister.
Appreciate all of you guys taking a look at this, taking a look at serving your country as a part of an administration, and understanding this process as best you can, and engaging
that
with...
guy, like, see, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. I'm really glad people know who Andy Richter is, because I feel like he's kind of like ubiquitous, but like I also never see him in anything. Like I saw him in Arrested Development. He just looks like the guy, he just looks like one of the brothers from his Arrested Development bit.
With this presidential transition process, to be involved as soon as you can, and at every level in that transition. So ultimately, you may land. It may be a meandering path to get to where you want to be, but ultimately the goal is to serve, not necessarily to serve in a particular way.
Good to be with you again, my friend.
All right, brother.
I thought they were gonna go for like a fist bump, like explosion situation, but then they just weirdly did a handshake. Okay. Project 2025, where you can go to learn in a 43-minute video, 43-minute and 53-second video, that when the transition of power occurs, there's going to be a time window in between, like, the election and the being sworn in. There's going to be a time in between there when, you know, power is going to be transferred. You need a transfer team in order to oversee that. And then once you're in office, you're actually going to be expected to have a plan for what to do. And your only other job is to rubber stamp whatever the president says. And also, don't do slurs on social media. They did reiterate that one effectively. But other than that, why did we need 40 minutes to tell us this? God, getting Project 2025 certified is really hard. Not because you have to learn a lot of things, but because they just keep reiterating the things you already learned in the first video. Good golly. Fascism is so dumb.
Durable deck is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, and plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. 2025